You are watching the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. The Humanities 101 Foundation welcomes you.
Welcome back, Nacho Nuts, to another episode of Nachos, the Neuro-Affirming Conversation Hour for outreach and support. I am so glad that you are here today. So wherever you're joining us from today, whether you're listening between classes, watching after work, catching your breath in the car, or letting this episode keep you company while you move through the day, I want you to know that this space, it's for you. This is a place where we slow down enough to notice what is happening inside of us and around us. A place where we remember that human beings are not machines, where we remember that we're seasonal, we are changing, we are tender, and we are growing. And today, I want to begin with a line from William Shakespeare. Shakespeare said, "Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's leafs hath all too short a date." That line comes from Sonnet 18, one of Shakespeare's most famous poems. And if we do not spend our days casually quoting Elizabethan poetry, like dorky English professors, there's something in that image that still reaches across the century and touches us gently on the shoulder. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May. What a beautiful and honest way to say that even in the season of blooming, life can be rough. May is supposed to be gentle, right? The flowers are opening, the trees are filling in, the light is stretching longer into the evening. Summer feels close enough to touch, and yet, even then, the winds come. Even then, tender things get shaken. My magnolia tree drops its blooms after a strong wind. And that's such a human truth. Sometimes we think growth should feel calm. We think healing should feel peaceful. We think progress should look like confidence and clarity and steady forward motion, always forward motion. But very often, growth feels more like being a little green bud in unpredictable weather. We are trying. We are opening. We're reaching towards the sun, and then life sends a rough wind. A deadline, a diagnosis, a hard conversation, a disappointment, a sensory overload, a week where your brain will just not cooperate. A moment where you look around and wonder, why does everyone else seem to be blooming so easily while you feel that you're just trying not to snap off the branch? But Shakespeare here reminds us that being shaken does not mean we are failing. The darling buds of May are still darling. They're still beautiful. They're still becoming. And that second part of the quote matters too. Summer's lease hath all too short a date. Summer doesn't last forever. The easy seasons, when they come, can feel painfully brief. And that's part of what makes them precious. But it's also part of what makes it important for us to notice them while they are here. This is where I think this is where I think about self-care. Not as a polished lifestyle brand version of self-care, but as the real thing. The kind of dirty, grimy, muddy self-care that says, I'm allowed to pause. I'm allowed to notice beauty while it is here. I'm allowed to protect my energy while the winds are rough. I'm allowed to be tender and still be strong. So as we begin today's episode, maybe we can hold both truths together. Yes, the winds shake us. And yes, there is still beauty in the blooming. Yes, the good seasons can feel short and all too short. But yes, that makes it even more important to create moments of predictability, balance, and joy where we can. Because we do not need perfect weather to be worthy of care. We do not need perfect timing to begin again. We do not need to be fully bloomed to be loved. So welcome back, friends. Let's take a breath together. Let's make a little room for the rough winds, the darling buds, and the short summer. And let's remember that here at NACHOS, we're not here to rush your growth. We're here to honor it. And that brings us naturally into one of the big things happening in the class of Humanities 101 right now for my students, the midterm exam. For the midterm, you're going to be watching the film Crip Camp. And I want to spend a little time here explaining why this film matters so much for our work together. Crip Camp, which is for free on YouTube, is not just a documentary about disability history, although it is absolutely that. It's not just a film about activism, although it is deeply rooted in activism. And it's not just a film about one summer camp where disabled young people found community, freedom, friendship, and a place to be fully themselves. It also happens to be a film about what happens when people who have been pushed to the margins begin to recognize their own power. That is the humanities question. And in this class, we're not just studying dates, facts, names, and texts. We're studying what it means to be human. We are studying how people make meaning, how communities form, how stories get told, how voices get centered while others get ignored, and how culture changes when people refuse to stay invisible. Crip Camp helps us see all of that. The film begins with a group of young disabled people at Camp Gen Ed, a summer camp in the Catskills where they experience something many of them had rarely experienced elsewhere: true belonging. Not pity, not charity, not being treated as a problem to solve. Belonging. And that matters, because once you experience what it feels to be treated as fully human, it becomes much harder to accept a world that treats you as less than that. And that's one of the major lessons of this film. Community can become a kind of classroom. Friendship can become a form of political education. Joy can become a spark for justice. And I want you to pay attention to that as you watch. Notice how the film is not about laws or protests. It's about friendships and relationships. It's about people sitting together, laughing together, arguing together, talking together, organizing together, and imagining a world that had not yet made enough room for them. That's where the humanities come in. As a humanities student, our job is not simply to ask what happened. Our job is to ask deeper questions. What does this reveal about human dignity? Who had power in this situation? Whose voices were ignored? What barriers were treated as normal? How did people challenge those barriers? And what does this story ask of us now, today, right here? Crip Camp asks us to think about access not as a special favor, but as a basic part of human community. It asks us to see disability not as a private tragedy, but as a social and cultural experience shaped by buildings, policies, attitudes, language, economics, education, and power. Most importantly, power. And that connects directly to so much of what we've been discussing in this course. When we talk about universal design, when we talk about micro-accommodations, when we talk about neuro-affirming spaces, when we talk about predictability, balance, joy, what we're really talking about is the same basic question. What kind of world are we building for one another? What kind of world are we building for one another? Crip Camp reminds us that inclusion does not happen by accident. It happens because people tell the truth. It happens because people organize. It happens because people say, we deserve to be here. And it happens because others learn to listen, adapt, and act. So as you prepare for the midterm, please do not watch this film like you're trying to memorize a list of trivia answers. That's not the point. That's not what you'll be tested on. It's an open notes exam. I'm not looking for a perfect answer. I'm looking for thoughtful engagement. I want to know what you, the human, noticed. I want to know what you, the human, were challenged by. I want to know where you, the human, saw courage, frustration, community, exclusion, creativity, anger, humor, and hope. And I want to know how the film helps you, the human, think differently about your role in society. Because that's really the heart of Humanities 101. You and your place in society. Crip Camp gives us powerful examples of people who were told directly and indirectly that society was not built for them. And instead of accepting that, they helped change society. That's not just disability history. That's human history. It's American history. It's civic history. It's cultural history. And it's also a reminder that each of us has a role to play. Maybe your role is to notice barriers other people overlook. Maybe your role is to ask better questions. Maybe your role is to make a classroom, a workplace, a family, or a community space a little more accessible. Maybe your role is to listen when someone tells you that the world is not working for them instead of rushing to explain why it should be. That's the humanities work. That is human work. So when you watch Crip Camp, give yourself time with it. Let it be more than an assignment. Let it be a story that you sit with. Let it remind you that history is made not only by the famous and powerful, but by people who gather around tables and camps and classrooms and protests and friendships and in communities, insisting that human dignity is not negotiable. And speaking of human dignity, I want to connect this film to something that is happening right now, today. Because Pope Leo just today released a new encyclical called the Magnificat Humanitas, which means magnificent humanity. And it's expected to focus on protecting the human person in the age of artificial intelligence. I've only been able to read about half of it so far today, but it was released today and you can read the full thing online. Now, regardless of whether you're Catholic, Christian, religious, spiritual, skeptical, or just someone trying to make sense of the world, this is worth paying attention to because the central question is deeply humanistic. The center of the Pope's writing and the central question is, what does it mean to protect human dignity when technology is changing faster than our ethics, our institutions, and even our imaginations? And that question belongs in this class. It belongs here in the humanities. Because the humanities are not just about old books, old paintings, old poems, or old civilizations. The humanities are about the human person. They're about value, meaning, culture, power, memory, justice, responsibility. They ask us to slow down and say, who is being helped? Who is being harmed? Who is being left out? Who gets to decide what progress means? And who do we become when we stop seeing people as fully human? From what I have read so far and what has been reported, the Magnificat Humanitas addresses artificial intelligence, workers' rights, warfare, and the need to keep human dignity at the center of technological advancement. It's also described by some as echoing an earlier tradition that responds to kind of an upheaval of capitalism and labor exploitation, going back to 1891. And that connection matters because every age has its version of this question. During the Industrial Revolution, the question was, what happens to human beings when they're treated as parts of a machine? In the disability rights movement, Crip Camp asks, what happens when society builds the world as if disabled people do not belong in it? And now, in the age of artificial intelligence, Magnificat Humanitas seems to be asking, what happens when our tools become powerful enough to shape work, war, education, communication, creativity, and identity itself? And that's not just a technological question. It's a human question. And that's where the film and that work meet. Both Crip Camp and the Magnificus Humanitas remind us that human dignity cannot be an afterthought. You can't build an institution first and then ask later whether people can access it. You can't design a classroom first and then ask later whether students can participate. You can't create a workplace first and then ask later whether workers are being treated as disposable. You cannot build technology first and then ask later whether it respects personhood of the people affected by it. The humanities asks us to pause before we confuse efficiency with wisdom. The old joke that science will teach you how to clone dinosaurs and humanities will explain to you why it's not a good idea. Humanities asks us to pause before we confuse productivity with worth. Humanities asks us to pause before we confuse innovation with justice, because sometimes something can be new and still be harmful. Something can be powerful and still be careless. Something can be impressive and still fail the test of human dignity. So as you watch Crip Camp and as you think about your midterm, I want you to hold this larger frame in mind. The question is not simply what happened in the film. The question is, what does this film teach me about the kind of world human beings deserve? And what does it teach me about my responsibility in this world? Because human dignity is not only defended in courtrooms, church documents, protests, or policy debates. It's defended in classrooms. It's defended in workplaces. It's defended in homes. It's defended in the way we listen. It's defended in the way we design. It's defended in the way we speak up. It's defended in the way that we notice who has been left out and then decide that leaving people out is not acceptable. This is why this matters. Films like Crip Camp show us that people fighting to be seen as fully human is a good thing. Magnifica Humanitas reminds us that in every new age, including an age of artificial intelligence, we have to keep asking whether our systems honor the magnificence of humanity or reduce people to data, labor, diagnosis, inconvenience, and cost. And for us as humanities students, that's the work. To be seen clearly and to see clearly. To ask better questions and to answer questions better. To protect human dignity and to constantly question those who don't see purpose in human dignity. And to remember that every person is more than what a system can measure, what a test shows, what a diagnosis explains. And that brings us right back to the world we're living in now, because if Crip Camp asks us to think about human dignity, access, community, and the way institutions either include or exclude, and if the Pope asks us to think about human dignity in the age of artificial intelligence, then this next article gives us a very real example of why those questions matter. A recent Science Daily article from the University of Exeter summarizes research by philosopher Lucy Olser on what she calls hallucinating with AI. And that phrase matters. We're used to hearing that AI can hallucinate, meaning that it can generate false information or present it confidently. But Olser, O-S-L-E-R, but Olser's concern is a little different. She argues that people may not only receive false information from AI, but may begin to build false beliefs, distorted memories, or even troubling personal narratives with AI when a chatbot validates, expands, and reinforces what a person already believes. Now, let's pause there because it's not a technology is bad conversation. At NACHOS, we're not here for panic. We're not here for skies falling, but we are here to pay attention. The article explains that conversational AI is different from a notebook, a search engine, or a regular tool because it responds socially. It can sound supportive. It can sound affirming. It can sound like it understands us. And for many people, especially people who are lonely, isolated, overwhelmed, or looking for reassurance, that can feel incredibly powerful. The concern is that if an AI system is too agreeable, too validating or too eager to build on whatever a user says, it may make false or distorted beliefs feel more real. And Nacho nots that is the humanities issue at question, because the question is not only can the technology answer correctly, the deeper question is what kind of relationship are we building with this tool? I have friends who've named theirs. What happens when a machine becomes part of how we think, how we remember, and how we tell the story of who we are? And what responsibilities do designers, educators, institutions, and users have when a tool can influence not just what we know, but what we believe is real? And this is where the PB&J framework becomes helpful. Predictability asks, does this tool help people understand what is happening, or does it create confusion? Balance asks, does this tool support human judgment, or does it replace human connection with something that only imitates it? Joy asks, does this tool help people feel more connected to life, community, and themselves, or does it pull them deeper into isolation? Those are not anti-technology questions. Those are pro-human questions. And that's kind of the whole point, right? And they connect beautifully with universal design, because universal design is not just about making things easier to use. It's about designing environments that account for human variability. Some people will use AI as a quick brainstorming partner. Some will use it as writing support. Some will use it to organize tasks. Some will use it because human systems have failed them, because they need someone or something to answer at 2 o'clock in the morning when the rest of the world is unavailable. What the hell does business casual mean? That doesn't make people foolish. It makes them human. But it also means the design matters. Now, the article notes that researchers are calling for stronger guardrails, better fact-checking, and less sycophancy, which is a fancy word for a system that flatters or agrees too much. In plain language, AI needs to know when to support us and when not, to simply nod along as a yes man. And honestly, so do we. Because good support is not always agreement. Sometimes it is telling you that your breath stinks and that you got crap in your teeth. Sometimes care sounds like, I hear you. Now let's check that together. Sometimes care sounds like, that feeling is real, but the conclusion may need a little more evidence. Sometimes care sounds like, you do not have to carry this alone, and this might be a moment to reach out to a trusted person. That's the difference between affirmation and amplification. Affirmation says your feelings matter. Amplification says everything you believe in this moment must be true. And those are not the same things. And this matters for our class because Humanities 101 is about you and your place in society. And part of living in society now is learning how to navigate these technologies. And it's really hard when they're increasingly woven into our thinking, our education, our communication, our politics, our creativity, and even our sense of self. So as humanities students, we have to ask, how do we use AI without surrendering our judgment? How do we welcome helpful tools without confusing convenience for wisdom? How do we protect vulnerable people from systems that may accidentally deepen fear, paranoia, misinformation, or isolation? And how do we build a culture where human connection does not become optional? Because when we talk about human dignity, this is part of it. Human dignity means we are more than data points. We are more than prompts. We are more than productivity. We are more than the stories a machine can generate about us. And we are also more than our most anxious thought, our most distorted memory, our loneliest night, our most overwhelmed moment. So the takeaway from this article is not never use AI. The takeaway is this: use tools wisely. Check reality with trusted people and reliable sources. Notice when a tool is making you feel more grounded, and notice when it is making you spiral. And remember, no chatbot, no platform, no technology, no matter how impressive, can replace the deep human work of community, care, accountability, and belonging. This is why the film matters. This is why the Pope's epistle matters. This is why this research matters, because all three are asking us in different ways to remember the same thing. Systems should serve human beings. Human beings should not be reshaped, reduced, isolated, or harmed to fit those systems. And that, Nacho Knots, is the humanities work. It's not just looking backward at what people have made. It's looking around at what we're making now and asking with courage and care, is this worthy of us? Is this protecting our dignity? Is this helping us become more human or less human? And the sad thing is we do both of those things together. And maybe that is the invitation I want to leave us with as we move into the summer. Take some time this summer to reconnect with your humanity. Not your productivity, not your resume, not your inbox, your grades, your calendar, but your humanity. Because it's very easy, especially in a world that moves this quickly, to start measuring ourselves by output. How much did I get done? How many messages did I answer? How many tasks did I cross off? How many hours did I work? How many times did I prove that I'm useful today? But you're not here simply to be useful. You're here to be human. And being human does not always have to cost money. And that matters because sometimes we're sold the idea that reconnecting with ourselves requires a purchase. A vacation, a retreat, a subscription, a perfect outdoor setup, a new outfit, a special product, a curated experience that looks good on social media. And those things can be lovely when they are available to us. But humanity has existed long before currency, long before wealth became an abstraction, long before labor was measured in wages, hours, productivity charts, and performance reviews. Human beings gathered around fires. We told stories, we sang, we laughed, we grieved, we shared food, we looked at the stars, we held babies, we listened for thunder, we walked together. We made meaning with one another long before anyone thought to put a price tag on it. So when I say reconnect with your humanity this summer, I don't mean go spend money. You don't have to manufacture a perfect version of rest. I mean breathe. I mean notice. I mean laugh. I mean sit outside, call someone, listen to music, drink water, watch the sky change, share a meal, even a simple one. Take a walk around the block. Let yourself enjoy something without turning it into content, achievement, or obligation. Because being human means we need time to breathe, time to notice, time to laugh. Time to sit outside and feel the air on our face. Time to share a meal without someone turning it into a meeting. Time to remember what our own voice sounds like when it's not rushing to meet someone else's demand. Summer can be a beautiful season for that. Not because it's perfect. Shakespeare already reminded us that rough winds can shake even the darling buds of May, and that summer's lease is always shorter than we want it to be. But maybe that is exactly why we need to notice it. The warm evenings, the longer light, the smell of food on a grill, the sound of kids playing somewhere down the block, the friend you've been meaning to call, the book you've been meaning to open, the body of water you've been meaning to sit beside, or even just imagine for a moment when you need peace. The quiet moment where you finally let yourself say, I'm tired. And I'm still worthy of tenderness. That matters. And as you reconnect with your own humanity, I want to invite you to connect with the humanity of other people too. Because everyone you meet is carrying something. That person moving slowly in the grocery store aisle, that student who has not quite figured out how to ask for help, the coworker who seems distracted, the family member who keeps repeating the same story, the stranger who is short with you because they're overwhelmed, the friend who's gone quiet, the person online who forgot there was another human being on the other side of the screen. This doesn't mean we excuse harm. It doesn't mean that we abandon boundaries. It doesn't mean that we pretend everything is fine when it's not. But it does mean we practice seeing people fully, not as obstacles, not as problems, not as interruptions or as labels, not as comments, usernames, diagnosis, political categories, or productivity units, but as human beings, complicated, tired, hopeful, afraid, funny, grieving, growing, trying, just like us. And that's part of Humanities too. The Humanities teaches us that every person carries a story. And sometimes the most important thing we can do is slow down long enough to remember that. So this summer, maybe your assignment beyond all the formal assignments, beyond the exams, beyond the weekly comments, is to practice being human on purpose. Make one conversation a little more present. Make one space a little more welcoming. Make one day a little less rushed. Make one choice that protects your nervous system. Make one moment where you choose curiosity instead of judgment. Make one moment where you choose care instead of contempt. Make one moment where you remember that access, dignity, and belonging are not abstract concepts. They're lived in small daily interactions, in the way we speak, in the way we listen, the way we make room, the way we forgive ourselves for needing rest, the way we let other people need rest too. And Nacho Nuts, I really mean this. Reconnecting with your humanity does not have to be dramatic. You don't need the perfect vacation. You don't need the cabin by the lake. You don't need a life-changing retreat. You don't even need a full bank account. You don't need to purchase permission to be alive. Sometimes reconnecting with your humanity is drinking water before you answer another email. Sometimes it's stepping outside for 3 minutes. Sometimes it's putting your phone down during dinner. Sometimes it's asking someone, how are you really doing? And then staying present long enough to actually hear the answer. Sometimes it's letting yourself enjoy something without earning it first. And that's a hard one for many of us. But joy doesn't have to be earned. Rest doesn't have to be earned. Human dignity doesn't have to be earned. So this summer, let's try to practice that. Let's practice that remembering that we're not machines. Let's practice building little pockets of predictability, balance, and joy. Predictability so our bodies and minds can feel safer. Balance so we don't confuse exhaustion with achievement. And joy so we remember that life is not only something to survive, but something we're allowed to taste, to share, and to savor. And as we do that, let's remember the lesson that's been running through this whole conversation today. From Shakespeare to Crip Camp, from human dignity to artificial intelligence, from the classroom to the wider world, the question keeps coming back to this. Are we treating people like people? Are we treating ourselves like people? Are we creating spaces where human beings can breathe, belong, participate, and become? That's the work. That's the invitation. And this summer, even in small and ordinary ways, we can begin again. So let me know what you plan to do to gain a little presence this summer. What little thing do you hope not to achieve, not to accomplish, but to simply do? Let me know down in the chat. Let me know in the comments. This will count for this week's participation. What do you plan to do this summer to get back to you, to get back to your humanity? I hope to paint more. I hope to take more walks. I want to go sit by the pond for one day and write poetry, for nothing other than to do it. And so this brings us to one more piece of research that fits beautifully with what we've been talking about today. Because if we're talking about reconnecting with our humanity, we also have to talk about reconnecting with our bodies. And this is not in the shame-based way, the bikini body way, the summer body, beach body, fix yourself way, but in a human way, in a gentle way, in a way that remembers that your body is not the enemy. Your body is not a project. Your body is not merely a vehicle for someone else's productivity. Your body is part of you, and it's been working very hard to carry you through this world. So again, in Science Daily, an article that was published in the journal Neuron reports that exercise may make us stronger not only by training our muscles, but also by changing activity in the brain. In experiments with mice, researchers found that certain brain cells, basically stayed active after running. After 2 weeks of daily treadmill exercise, the mice improved their endurance, but when researchers blocked the neurons from communicating after exercise, the mice did not gain endurance in the same way, even though they were still exercising. Now, that's a lot. It's basically kind of difficult medical science and neurology, but let's bring this down to earth. The basic idea is this. When we move our bodies, our brains may keep working after the movement ends. And this work that the brain does might help the body adapt, recover, and build endurance over time. In other words, exercise is not just something happening in the legs, the lungs, the heart, or the muscles. It's also happening in the brain. And Nacho Knots, I love that because it reminds us that we're integrated beings. We're not floating minds trapped inside of inconvenient bodies. We're not machines with replaceable parts. We're whole human beings with bodies, brains, emotions, memories, souls, habits, limits, and possibilities, all constantly talking to one another. And this matters for how we think about self-care. Sometimes we treat movement as punishment. We say, I ate something bad, so now I have to work it off. We say, I've been lazy, so now I need to make up for it. We say, I do not need to look the way I'm supposed to look, so I need to force my body to look the way that I believe it should. But what if movement is not punishment? What if it's communication? What if movement is one of the ways that we tell our brain and body, we are still here, we are still adapting, we are still becoming, we are still capable of care? This study does not mean everyone needs to become an endurance runner. It doesn't mean that everyone needs to use a treadmill immediately. It was a study on mice, so we need to be careful about overclaiming what it means for human beings. But it does give us a beautiful doorway into a broader truth. Our bodies and brains are deeply connected, and even small patterns of movement can be a part of how we support our lives. And that's where we bring this back to predictability, balance, and joy. Predictability might mean choosing a small movement routine that your body can trust, a walk after dinner, stretching when you wake up, Tai Chi, gentle movement between study sessions, taking the stairs when it feels good, parking a little further away when you have the energy, dancing in the kitchen to that one song. Balance means not turning movement into another demand that crushes you. It means honoring your fatigue, honoring and noticing pain, adapting. It means remembering that rest is not the opposite of growth. Rest is often part of how growth becomes possible. And joy means finding movement that does not feel like punishment. Maybe joy is walking outside and feeling the sun. Maybe joy is swimming. Maybe it's gardening. Maybe it's chair yoga, or maybe it's stretching or doing old school calisthenics in front of the TV. Maybe joy is wandering through a museum, a park, a neighborhood, or a store with no urgent mission, just doing it. Just to move, just to notice, just to stay present. Maybe joy is music loud enough that your body remembers it's allowed to have rhythm and move to that rhythm. And that counts. In a normal Nachos fashion, I want us to resist the all or nothing trap. You don't have to become a fitness influencer. You don't have to buy expensive equipment. You don't even have to join a gym. Don't start with an hour. Humanity existed long before treadmills, fitness trackers, gym memberships, and step count apps. Human beings moved because we were alive. We walked, we carried, we reached, we danced, we played, we gathered, we rested. We moved through the world in relationship with the land, with one another, and with the rhythms of daily life. So maybe this summer, part of reconnecting with your humanity is also reconnecting with movement as something older and kinder than the fitness industry. Movement doesn't have to be performance. Surely doesn't have to be monetized. Definitely doesn't have to be optimized. Movement can simply be a way of coming home to yourself, to your body. And for my students, this connects to your work in the humanities because the humanities asks us to pay attention to the whole person. A human being is not just a mind that writes essays. It's not just a grade in a classroom. A human being is not just a worker in a job. A human being is not just a consumer in an economy or a taxpayer in a government. A human being is a body moving through space and time, a nervous system responding to the world, a story infinitely unfolding. So when we ask what it means to live well, we cannot leave the body out. We cannot leave rest out. We cannot leave access out. We cannot leave disability out. We cannot leave joy out. Because a humane society is not one that demands everybody move in the same way, at the same pace, toward the same goal. A humane society is one that makes room for different bodies, different needs, different capacities, different rhythms, and different ways of being strong. That's the deeper lesson here. Strength is not just force. Strength is adaptation. Strength is recovery. Strength is support. It's listening. Strength is knowing when to push gently and when to pause. And maybe, just maybe, strength is not about conquering the body. Maybe strength is about cooperating with it. So as you move into the summer, I want to invite you to ask a gentle question. What kind of movement makes me feel more human? Not more productive, not more impressive, not more acceptable to someone else, more human. Maybe it's 5 minutes. Maybe it's one song. Maybe it's a walk to the mailbox. Maybe it's a slow stretch before bed. Maybe it's sitting outside and turning your face towards the breeze. Start there. Start with care. Start with your actual body, not the imaginary body capitalism keeps trying to sell you. And remember, your body is not failing you because it has needs. Your body is not failing you because it needs support. You are a whole human being. A whole human beings deserve practice that helps them live with a little more predictability, a little more balance, and a little more joy. So let's figure out what those practices are. And before we wrap up today, Nacho Knots, I want to invite you to stay connected with everything we're building here. Remember, if this episode gave you something to think about, if it helped you breathe a little easier, if it made the world feel even slightly more human for a few minutes, please like the video, follow or subscribe, and share it with someone who you think might need it. That really does help. It helps the show reach more people. It helps us grow this community, and it helps us keep doing the work of making neuro-affirming conversations, humanities education, disability advocacy, and public scholarship more available to folks who may not otherwise find it. And of course, if you're able and you believe in the mission, you can also support the Humanities 101 Foundation. Your donations through GoFundMe and other sites help us continue building programs rooted in access, dignity, universal design, storytelling, and the belief that the humanities belong to everyone. And you don't have to give directly to GoFundMe. You can also round up at Walmart through the Spark Good program. And speaking of community joy and making the summer a little more human, we also have this week's ticket drop. This week, we are giving away tickets to Kesha. Yes, Kesha at Pine Knob. So if your summer needs a little glitter, a little chaos, a little cathartic sing-along energy, and maybe just enough sparkle to remind your nervous system that joy still exists, this one is for you. This weekly ticket drop is part of our larger summer concert ticket giveaway through Humanities 101 Foundation. The idea is simple. We want to create moments of joy, connection, and shared experience while also bringing more people into the work we are doing. So to enter this week's Kesha ticket drop, here's what you have to do. You have to subscribe or follow to this YouTube channel, share any video from this account, and then comment "done" on the video. That's it. Subscribe, share a video, and comment "done." And remember that this is part of that larger giveaway. So if you want to check out that larger giveaway where we're giving out tickets to some of the major sold out shows at Pine Knob, visit www.humanities101.org/giveaway. That page has details, rules, and the information you need to enter. One of the best parts is that you can choose which show you actually want to be entered for, because we're not trying to send hardcore hip hop fans off to boot scoot with Brooks and Dunn unless that's sincerely part of your healing journey. This is about joy that actually fits you. Predictability, balance, and joy, even in the concert giveaway, folks. We're nothing if not consistent here. So check out the website, enter the larger summer giveaway, and make sure you jump into this week's Kesha ticket drop by subscribing, sharing any video on this account, and commenting "done." And if you're not able to donate or enter or attend, you can still help by sharing the work. Sharing is support. Commenting is support. Telling someone about the show is support. Helping the right person find a message of dignity, access, and belonging is support. That's how communities grow. Not through giant gestures, not always at least, sometimes through one share, one comment, one invitation, one person saying, "Hey, I think you might like this." So I want to thank you, Nacho Knots, for being here, for thinking with me, for caring about one another, and for helping us be a little bit more human in this world. One conversation, one story, and one small act of connection at a time. But before we close today, let's take a moment to gather up everything we've carried together in this episode. Because we began with Shakespeare's reminder that rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and we use that image to think about growth, tenderness, and the fact that even blooming things can be shaken. That felt like the right place to begin, because so much of today's conversation has been about what it means to remain human in a world that often asks us to harden, rush, produce, or pretend that we're not affected by the winds around us. From there, we moved into the midterm discussion in the film Crip Camp. We talked about why that film matters, not just as disability history, but as human history. Crip Camp reminds us that belonging is powerful, community is powerful, access is powerful. And once people experience being treated as fully human, it becomes much harder to accept a world that treats them as an afterthought, as a problem, as a puzzle. Then we connected that to the conversation about broader human dignity, including the Pope's, Magnifica Humanitas that came out today, and the question it raises about artificial intelligence, technology, labor, institutions, and the value of the human person. We asked what it means to build systems that serve humanity instead of systems that reduce people to data, output, diagnosis, cost, or convenience. We also spend time with the article about AI and belief, and we thought about the difference between affirmation and amplification. Affirmation says your feelings matter. Amplification says everything you believe in this moment must be true. Those are not the same thing. The distinction matters, especially in a world where technology can sound caring without actually being wise. Then we turn towards summer and the invitation to reconnect with our humanity, not through expensive purchases, not through perfect vacations, not through curated versions of rest, but through the ordinary, ancient practices human beings have always needed: breathing, noticing, laughing, walking, sitting, sharing food, listening, resting, and remembering that humanity existed long before currency, wealth, or the abstraction of labor. And finally, we talked about the movement, the brain, and the body. We reflected on research suggesting that exercise may not only change the muscles, but also involves brain processes that help the body adapt over time. And when we use that as a reminder that movement doesn't have to be punishment, we started to see something different. We started to see movement as communication, movement as care, movement as one way that we become more of ourselves and come home to ourselves. So if there's one thread running through all of this, it's this. Human beings are not machines. We're not productivity units. We're not data points. We're not grades or diagnoses, usernames, job titles, or output reports. We are bodies and minds and stories and relationships. We are tender buds and rough winds. We are people who need access, dignity, rest, connection, movement, meaning, and joy. And that, Nacho Knots, is why the humanities matter. They help us remember what systems often forget. They help us ask better questions, provide better answers. They help us notice who has been left out. They help us resist the forces that flatten people into categories, and they help us imagine something more humane. So as you move through this week, and as we move deeper into the summer, I hope you carry this with you. You're allowed to be human. You're allowed to need rest. You're allowed to need support. You're allowed to grow at a human pace. You're allowed to help build a world where other people can do the same. And before we go, Nacho Knots, let's take a moment for our affirmations, not as a summary, not as a checklist, not as one more thing to complete before the episode closes, but as a way of letting today's conversations settle into our bodies. Because if we talked about human dignity, then we should practice speaking to ourselves with dignity. If we talk about disability justice, then we should practice making room for the parts of ourselves and others that the world too often misunderstands. If we talk about technology, systems, and AI, then we should remember that no system gets the final word on what human life is worth. And if we talk about summer, movement, rest, and reconnection, then maybe we can give ourselves permission to live like human beings again. So take a breath. Let your shoulders soften if they can. Let your body arrive here with you. You don't have to perform this moment. You can simply receive it. I'm allowed to be human. I'm allowed to be tender. I'm allowed to be unfinished. I'm allowed to be in process. I do not have to become harder just because the world is rough. I can be shaken and still be growing. I can be tired and still be worthy. I can be uncertain and still belong. I don't have to earn my dignity. I don't have to prove my humanity. I don't have to justify my needs before I'm treated with care. My body is not a problem to defeat. My mind is not a machine to optimize. My worth is not measured by my speed, output, grades, productivity, or performance. I am more than what any system can count. I am more than what any algorithm can predict. I am more than what any institution can record. I am more than what any label can hold. I can listen to my body with kindness. I can move in ways that feel caring instead of punishing. I can rest before I break. I can pause before I spiral. I can check in with trusted people when I need grounding. I can let support be part of my strength. I can reconnect with my humanity in small ways. A breath, a walk, a song, a conversation, a moment outside, a meal shared, a message sent, a laugh that reminds me I am still here. I do not need to buy my way back to myself. I do not need a perfect vacation to deserve rest. I do not need a curated life to experience joy. Humanity is older than currency. Belonging is older than productivity. Care is older than capitalism. And joy is still allowed to be simple. I can see the humanity of others. I can remember that every person carries a story I may not know. I can practice curiosity instead of contempt. I can practice care without abandoning my boundaries. I can notice who has been left out. I can help make room. I can choose access over exclusion. I can choose dignity over dismissal. I can choose connection over isolation. And together, we can say, we are not machines. We are not disposable. We are not data points. We are not problems to be managed. We are human beings. We deserve access, dignity, rest. We deserve community, and we deserve joy. And Nacho Knots, this is bigger than one episode. This is the larger mission. Every time we choose to see people fully, we push back against a world that flattens them. Every time we make space more accessible, we declare that belonging should not be reserved for a few. Every time we listen to someone's story, we honor the humanities in their most living form. Every time we refuse to reduce a person to a diagnosis, a grade, a job, a title, a mistake, a need, or a moment of struggle, we help build a more humane world. That's what this community is about. A world where all people, neurodivergent, neurotypical, are not treated as problems to solve. A world where disabled people are not treated as afterthoughts. A world where students are not treated as data points. A world where workers are not treated as machines. A world where technology serves human dignity instead of replacing human connection. A world where rest is not shameful. A world where joy is not frivolous. A world where access is not charity. A world where every person has room to breathe, belong, participate, and become. So as you leave this episode, carry that with you. Your presence matters. Your story matters. Your care matters. Your questions matter. Your small acts of connection matter. And every time you choose humanity over hurry, dignity over dismissal, access over exclusion, and care over contempt, you are not just getting through the day. You are help shaping the world. One conversation, one classroom, one shared story, one moment of grace, one small act of care at a time. And that, Nacho Knots, is where we land for today. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for thinking deeply, feeling honestly, and staying open to the work of becoming more human together. And remember, if this episode meant something to you, please like, follow, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. These small actions help the conversation reach more people. They help us continue building a more community rooted in access, dignity, storytelling, and care. If you're a student, make sure you complete your weekly participation by commenting on this week's video. And remember, for your midterm, if you're watching Crip Camp and responding thoughtfully, I'm not looking for perfection. I'm looking for honest engagement with the film, the themes, and what it helps you understand about your place in society. Don't forget about this week's Kesha ticket drop. Subscribe or follow, share any video from this account and comment done. That's all you have to do. You can also check out humanities101.org/giveaway. All right. And choose the shows that fit, right? Because again, as I said, right? This is what we do. So again, remember, you're not a machine. You're not disposable. You're not alone. You're human. All right. You're worthy of dignity, access, rest, connection, and joy. And the world is better when we have room to breathe, belong, participate, and become. This has been Nachos, the Neuroaffirming Conversation Hour for Outreach and Support. I'm Dr. Adam Dutch Hazlett, reminding you to take care of yourself, take care of one another, and keep building a world where everybody gets a seat at the table. Until next time, Nacho Knots, stay curious, stay kind, and remember, predictability shows respect, balance shows care, and joy shows connection.
Thank you for joining us. See you next week. The views and opinions expressed in this video are solely those of the creator and do not reflect the views of any institution, employer, or affiliated organization.